Hello, my name is Roman Dzindzi, and this is the lecture and advice how to play King's Indian defense. Now, there is a lot of theory in King's Indian defense. What am I trying to do here? I'm not trying to challenge the modern theory. For those who play King's Indian and try to explore something new in King's Indian, and for those who were thinking and maybe are thinking of playing King's Indian, but they don't think they are properly prepared. Well, here I'm going to show you brand new approach to King's Indian, like easy way to play King's Indian. I'm not going to try to challenge most popular variations, because most popular variations you're likely to have your opponents follow all by the book to, in some cases, up to the 25th or 30th move. Here, what we're trying to do, I'm going to introduce you to almost on every system in King's Indian, something different. Something different, but at the same time, very playable. In a lot of openings, if you do something new, has never been played, especially if you are black, the chances are you are going to get pretty bad position. Everything I will recommend may not be the best continuation for black in King's Indian, but it's best in the way that you will play it, you will be prepared for it, and it's not very well known. At least you will know what your plans are, how to play this game, and most of the time this is a lot more important than play every opening by the book according to theory. Every position I will show you is not very well known for black, and every position is very, very playable. So, let's start looking for one of the variations of King's Indian. G6, knight c3, bishop g7, e4, d6, knight e2. Knight e2 move was very popular at some time for years, and black always had some problems equalizing. What I want to show you is a way to play against it without touching the main theory, without getting to the main theoretical continuation. And you will get very, very good dynamic play. On 92, if you look at the games, 99% of the time, black castles. That's not what we do. What I recommend to play is c5. Now, and not after castling. If black plays c5, white has practically two ways to play. Either d5 or d takes c. Let's see what happens on d takes c. Queen a5 is not a good choice here, so we'll play d takes c, and after queen takes d8, king takes. I don't think white has any advantage at all. Suppose bishop f4, trying to castle long, knight c6, and after castling, bishop d7, and white's knight on e2 is not very well placed, and it's not very clear what to do with this knight. Now suppose knight g3. Now this position is very good position for black. I would say maybe even better for black because of highly unexpected move. Move like knight g4 looks like amateurish move and without sufficient ground, but it's a very, very good move based on concrete reason. Well, f2 pawn is hanging. Well, there's rook d2, e5, attacking the bishop. And now, after e5, white goes bishop e3 and lets us take this bishop. Bishop g5 doesn't change much because after f6, if white goes to e3, we're going to get almost same position. And if white tries f3, then we can simply take on g5 and go knight d4, having clearly superior position. But if bishop goes to e3 right away, this is also very comfortable for black. After knight takes e3, pawn takes, and bishop h6. White has to protect the e3 pawn some clumsy way. Black has two bishops and potentially good square on d4 for knight because e3 pawn is pinned, and bishop e6 also. Black is definitely having some advantage here. So, but I don't think you can really expect white to take on c5. White should go d5. But now you will see what is the idea of playing c5 in the early stage. Because now we're going to go b5. And we're going to get variety of the Benko gambit. Well, obviously, taking with a knight is not good for white, because after knight takes e4, we exchange the wing pawn, knight pawn, for a central pawn. But if pawn takes on b5, we go a6. And we see Benko gambit type of position with very, very bad knight g to e2 move. After we finish the theoretical discussion of certain variations of King's Indian, and I will show you some games typical to these particular variations. So what I am showing here, I played several games actually on the internet against very strong players, and most of them grandmasters, and every one of them failed to get decent position for white. Black has tremendous compensation here. We're gonna look at this position in the game section, which is followed the theoretical section of the King's Indian. So this is something that we should seriously consider. Here, knight e2. Remember, do not castle, although it is a main move, because after knight g3, c5, and d5, we cannot play b5 anymore because knight is going to take on b5. So we have to do it in an earlier stage, c5, d5, now b5. Now white has to take with a pawn, we go a6, and we're going to enter Benko type of positions. In the end of the DVD, I'm going to show you some typical games played with it. Now let's look at the system that I don't know how frequently it's played, but I used to play this system for white very frequently, and I think black has to be careful the way they play against it. d4, knight f6, c4, g6, knight c3, bishop g7, knight f3. White is holding e4. They don't play e4 yet. Well, if you see a lot of games played castling here, I recommend to play d6 first. And there is a reason why we play d6 first before we castle. It's a very well hidden reason, and it's very subtle. Of course, if white chooses to play e4, then it's going to be identical position, the same thing. But d6 is very valuable and very important because white didn't play e4, and likely they want to play bishop f4 or bishop g5 variation. I used to play this bishop f4 variation, and I won plenty of games, and some of them I got nearly winning position in the opening. Let me show you what would happen if black plays normally, castling. What about this variation? White is going to go e3, and suppose black goes after dark square bishop. If gets dark square bishop, they're going to have good position. But the problem is they cannot get dark square bishop because of bishop g5. After h6, bishop h4, and on g5, white has very clever knight d2 move, which attacks the knight on h5, and if black retreats, white retreats, then h6, g5 is totally unjustified. And on knight f4, white can simply play bishop g3, and knight on f4 looks silly. So, and taking on h4 is, of course, does not look good. So how this c6 is changing the issue? We go c6, and now if e3, we go queen a5. Now what this move does? What this move does is that black wants to play knight e4. Knight e4, that may double white's pawn. For example, on bishop e2, if we go knight e4, that will double white's pawns and it's allowing black to play e5, and black definitely has a good position. Black can also castle here, and after castling goes c5 and knight c6. White has virtually no play in this position. So knight e4 should be prevented. Suppose they prevent with bishop d3 move. Okay, then unexpectedly black can get white dark square bishop. After knight h5, bishop g5, h6, bishop h4, g5, and bishop has to move to g3, where black is going to take, because if white plays knight d2, black is going to take knight on h4, and black's h5 knight is protected by the queen. That's the key of this move order. Now let's see what would have happened if we didn't play that. Suppose white goes e3 and we continue in this position. We castle, white goes e3, we go knight d7. This is actually the way it's been played for a long time, for years. But I played this position many times for white, and I can assure you that this is not a good position for black. Bishop on h2 is very strong because white can never go knight f8, pawn will be hanging, And if white goes e4, black goes e4 after knight d2 and knight f8, c5, white has very dangerous pressure from this h2 bishop, and attack on queen side, white's attack develops very rapidly. This is definitely bad position, and I know because some very strong player collapsed here in several moves when I played them. So this is definitely very bad position. For instance, d5, we can go queen b3, attack d5 pawn. On c6, we go b5. Next move is queen a4. Bishop d6 is coming. Black has no counterplay on king side. Very bad position. And now we go back few moves, and you will see that it's important not to allow this position. Play c6, and after e3, queen a5. If queen c2, stopping knight e4, besides the bishop f5 move, and you know that's the rule that I explained almost on every DVD on the openings, when one side has space disadvantage, it's good for them to exchange some minor pieces. Besides, we can go knight h5, and we have no problem getting black's dark square bishop. White cannot stop us. So queen c2 has simple refutation, so is bishop d3, and this move, queen a5, guarantees black very, very comfortable position. This is something you should keep in mind. And I don't think you can see it in the books that you should play c6 and queen a5 before you castle. But this is just, I spoke to some great King's Indian players, such as Grandmaster that passed away, Boleslavsky, Bronstein, Svislov. I grew up with their instructions, and I inherited from them some knowledge that you can have very hard time picking up from the book. So now I'm here sharing it with you. So this is the way to play against bishop f4. And what is interesting, same approach goes for bishop g5. Bishop g5 has all the similar ideas. Now we go c6, and after e3, queen a5. We definitely want to go knight e4. Now on queen d2, that stops knight e4, we can go bishop g4. Now we are attacking g5 bishop, because after we take on f3, g5 bishop will be loose. And after bishop h4, I think black is doing fine. They can simply take and go queen h5. You see black is doing 5. Same idea, queen a5 works equally well on bishop g5, against bishop g5, and against bishop f4. So this is second observation, a second point that you have to remember. And I'm trying to bring here points that you're going to have very hard time getting from regular books and theoretical publications. Now, let's go to, at one point, a very popular system for white. And even now, certain players try to play, and I have to tell you, if you are not accurate, if you don't play correctly, you have a very good chance to get bad positions. This is Averbach system, and black has multiple ways to play, and all these ways they went through some hard times, And even today, I don't know why it's not so popular for white, but nevertheless, the lower the level is, lower I'm talking about, not 1,300 players, well, just under 2,500 players, the lower you go from 2,500 to 2,000, the more popular this Averbach system proves. So in this position, what I recommend is c5, d5. This is e5. This is unclear position. This is one way to play for black, and the other way to play h6. Now, I do not want to go through both of them and exclusively explain everything there, because what I want to go through, only the variation that I would recommend you to play, because I think it's the most productive approach. I recommend to play h6. On h6, the only move that makes sense is bishop e3. Well, bishop f4 is inferior move because of knight c6, and black gets very good position. On d5, for example, black should go e5, attacking the dark square bishop, and after bishop e3, even knight d4. This is a pawn sacrifice that gives black very, very comfortable position. Now threatening knight takes e4, so after queen d3, c6, and then queen go to b6, black has sufficient compensation for sacrificed pawn. But if you don't feel like sacrificing anything, you can go knight e7. You're doing okay here too. In any case, on h6, you should expect over 90% of the game being played with bishop e3, and now c5. I want to explain here something. Well, there are two moves here, actually three moves for white. One of them is d takes c, one of them is e5, and the main move d5. D takes c. Let's see what is going to happen here. It's not much theory here, because after queen a5, now queen d2 is not such a good move, because we simply take on c5, and after e5 and rook d8, black has clear advantage. On queen c2 will be bishop f5, on queen c1 knight e4. This is not a good way to play for white, and that's why bishop d2 is the main move here. And then after queen takes c5, knight f3, bishop g4. This is very comfortable position for black, and after castle, black should take and play knight to d7. Remember, do not take the pawn on c4, because you may lose material. You see, the knight is hanging and pawn on b7. So, but after you play knight d7, you have very comfortable position for black. This does not represent big danger for black. e5 move. Now, in my younger years, after e5, black was automatically playing knight d7 almost in every game. However, white gets some advantage, and there were some positions, some games white won, some they ended in a draw. But it took me almost 40 years, and with the help of Ripka, to come to conclusion the real strong move in this position is not knight d7, but knight h7. Because after knight h7, e takes d, c takes d, and after bishop d4, you see knight is not on d7, so black can play queen takes d6, and after bishop takes g7, this position is absolutely equal. Black is going to go knight c6 next move, and white has no advantage at all. So knight h7 is the way to play in this position, and you should expect full equality. And now let's go with d5 move. Well, this is actually, the statement I'm going to make now is very controversial, because discovery that I made here goes way, way back, goes maybe like 25 or 30 years back. That's exactly when the Averbach system was very, very popular. At that time, my discovery I kept in a secret because I was very active in a tournament playing, and it was top of my career, and I was looking for a fish to catch on the hook. However, I never had a chance to do that, and I've seen many, many games that happened that white went for this type of positions and was never played by black the correct continuation. Now let's see. After d5, e6, and now what the white should do is should go h3, bishop d3, and knight f3. But they can do it with a queen on d1 and king on g8, or they may include queen d2, king h7 moves. You may think there is no difference, but there's a huge difference, actually like a day and night difference. Suppose they play queen d2. You have to know, and in both cases I have very staggering revelation here. On queen d2, we should play ed, and after ed, king h7. Now, here is the secret of this position. If white goes knight f3, regardless queen d2 played or not, after bishop f5, castling, and knight e4, black is doing very well in this position. The idea of Averbach system entirely is to play h3 to discomfort all black's minor pieces. Now bishop f5 is a simply bad move because g4. And you see now knight e4 would simply lose because of f3, and bishop f4 also will lose because of f3, so black is forced to pull the bishop all the way back. So bishop f5 is a bad move. So h3 is designed for that. And after h3, remember, we can get position with a queen on d2, king h7, or with king on g8 and queen on d1. So let's look at this position with king on h7 and queen on d2. After b5, white has to be very careful not to get in trouble. b5 move gives black very comfortable position. This pawn has to be taken either by pawn or by the knight. Well, what happens if knight takes? Then knight e4, queen c2, rook e8. After rook e8, white has difficulties complete development. On bishop d3, black is going to go a6, which is very strong move. While taking on e4 will give black tremendous initiative. Queen a5 check, followed by queen takes b5, and white is nearly lost. So if knight goes back on c3, then we go knight g3. This is the key of the sacrifice. And after knight g3, you can see that I don't think if you are white, you will be thrilled to play rook h2. It's absolutely awful position. And after bishop f5, or maybe even knight f5, white is on the verge of collapsing completely. So that's what will happen if knight takes on b5. But if pawn takes, then black simply plays knight d7, and after knight f3, all of a sudden, black, after sacrificing the b pawn, they will get back the central pawn by playing knight b6, and on castling, bishop b7, and pawn on d5 cannot be protected. Next move, black is going to take on d5, having very good position. Now I want to go back and, okay, here we will discuss what will happen if white does not play queen d2. They play h3. Then we have to take on d5, and we go rook e8. There is no point of playing b5 because after knight takes, knight does not go on e4 with a tempo attacking white's queen on d2. So this sacrifice is invalid now. Rook e8, and now bishop d3. Here is, you're going to witness now very interesting battle of minor pieces. This is also something that you cannot find anywhere in the theory. After bishop d3, well, I want to point again, knight f3, bishop f5, castling knight e4 will give black superior position. That's why bishop d3 has to be played. And now white wants to play knight f3 and castle. There have been a lot of games being played, knight d7, knight f3, and black was suffering and they lost a lot of games. Actually, some Russian grandmasters, they won like dozens of games in this position. The space advantage turned out to be decisive in most of these games. But here, the dance of the minor pieces that I told you, you're going to see it now. It's very good for black to exchange some minor pieces here because, as I explained before, they have space disadvantage. So the move is knight h5, which prevents white from playing knight f3 because of knight g3. After knight g3, white is in immediate danger, immediate trouble. You see that. So that's why knight has to be developed to e2 to stop black from playing knight g3. After knight e2, we going knight d7. Again, preventing white from concluding development, because if white castles, the knight e5, and next move knight is going to take the bishop on d3, which cannot retreat because of the weakness on c4. White has, in order to be successful in the opening, in order to get the position they want to, they have to keep black's pieces back and avoid exchanges. g4 looks like may do that. Now, after g4, we have to retreat. But again, if white castles, we go knight e5 and take on d3. So, but now white goes knight g3, and after knight e5, bishop e2. White accomplished everything they wanted, and it looks like if white can castle or go queen d2, black is going to have very, very hard time. That's where the move that I will show you is highly unusual and very, very powerful. The move is knight h7, which gives black immediate advantage. After knight to h7, black wants to play knight g5. What white can do? If white goes queen d2 or queen c2, knight g5 will devastate completely white's position after castling knight f3. And you see that black cannot move. Knight on f3 is like a bone down their throat, and they can't move. Now, knight will go to d4 later. Black is going to go b5 and start very powerful attack on the queen side. So what can white do in this position after knight h7? After knight h7, one of the possibilities is to play h4 to stop knight from coming to g5. But then we're coming back with the knight on f6. Now we're attacking g4 pawn, which cannot be protected by f3 because knight takes g4, followed by rook takes bishop on e3. So g5 has to be played, and then knight f6 to g4. That's probably putting the last nail in the coffin, because bishop takes g3, obviously it loses after bishop takes, and knight f3 check, and on g takes h, knight takes bishop, and bishop takes h6. There is no need to explaining to you that white is totally busted here. And what else can white do? Bishop d2 is not an option either because of knight takes c4. So in this position, black has big advantage, and this is not playable. Well, I actually looked at position after knight h7. Well, when I discovered this move many years ago, I didn't have chance to check this on a computer, on some powerful engine. But then when I looked at it with Rivka, to my great satisfaction, she confirmed evaluation as the position is very much favorable for black. That's another variation that I would strongly recommend, and I vouch for it. So I think Averbach, in my understanding, Averbach's system is not that good for white because of this way to play. But I'm sure this is not the theoretical evaluation. White may not be playing for some different reason. I'm giving you my reasons that are not so well known, and I am 100% sure they are very, very powerful. Okay, let's talk now about the classical variation of King's Indian. Well, in a very well-known position, that's how the classical played, e4, d6, knight f3, castle, and bishop e2. We all know that the main move is e5 followed by knight c6, or knight c6 followed by e5. Well, I want to attract your attention to a couple of other ways to play. So I'm not claiming that they're necessarily better ways to play against King's Indian classical, but there are interesting ways to play and out of ordinary plays. And I can guarantee you, if you play correctly, You may get slight disadvantage like normally should be an opening, but you are not going to get a very bad position. Okay, one of the ways is knight a6. This is not a new continuation. This is very old continuation and it's been played for a long time. What is the new that I want to show you? An e5. This is well known, but what is not well known in this position is if white plays rook e1. If white plays rook e1, which was played, black has several different ways to play, and it's been played, with exception of the variation that I'm going to show you now. The new move is bishop g4, which I really recommend to play in this position. So if you chose to play knight a6 system, on the rook e1, bishop g4 is a new and very interesting move. If white plays d5, black can go knight c5, attacking e4 pawn. One of the possible continuations, and typical for these positions, knight d2 move, because exchange of light square bishops should be favorable for white. But the only thing is black has unexpected tactical shot knight d3 that turns tables in their favor. And it does because they get, after rook f1 is forced, since bishop takes g4, knight takes g4, actually it's going to lead to approximately a similar position. And now after rook f1, knight takes c1. And that gets rid of dark square bishop for white. And after rook c1, now we can go simply knight f6. And knowingly bad bishop in a closed center on g7 will have very good landing square on h6. Well, there was a bad bishop, but after we got rid of white's dark square bishop, this bishop is going to be dominating on h6 c1 diagonal. So this is one thought about this variation. And of course there is a possibility in this position to play h3, bishop takes f3, bishop takes f3, and I'm going to show you the games in a game section, game played with this continuation. So that following up on this position you should see in a game section right after the theoretical parts. So now this is one way to play. And another interesting way to play, I would suggest here, is knight d7 or e5, which is the same transposition, knight d7. And now the most popular move for white is rook e1. It's by far number one move, rook e1. And here is we can play puzzling h6 move. The idea of h6, white plays bishop f1, that's what they want the rook to protect the pawn and keep tension in the center. And now we play knight h7. Idea is not just to play f5, prepare f5, because to play f5, black didn't have to make two moves here. Black didn't have to make two moves, h6 and knight h7. They could make one move, knight e8 and f5. But there is a different idea about this move. After rook e1, h6, bishop f1, knight h7, the idea is to play knight g5 to get rid of white's f3 knight, and it's good for a couple of reasons. Reason one, in King's Indian, and I've said it over and over again, it's good, since black has space disadvantage, it's good to get rid of one set of minor pieces, maybe even two. This to exchange knights, but mainly after we get rid of f3 knight, that would weaken white's d4 pawn, so white is going to have to make decisions. Now, if d5, then we're going to go f5, of course, but if de, well, then we can go de or knight takes c5. Even knight takes c5. This is perfectly okay. Knight takes c5, bishop takes c5. So we exchanged one set of pieces. Taking on h6, of course, is not good because of queen h4, attacking mate and the bishop. And in this position, black has a satisfactory position. After h3, bishop g7. Bishop is going to go to e6. Knight may come back to f6, rook e8. And black has very good bishop on g7. Very playable position. So if white doesn't play de, then they can go bishop e3. And here we go knight g5. Okay, this is the key move of whole variation. If knight takes g5, for example, hg, and queen d2, white wants to keep the tension. They don't want to go d5 and allow black to play f5, so they try to keep the tension. Queen d2, and now we take on d4, and I have played a lot of games with it. And after knight e5, you have very comfortable knight on e5. And you have the double g pawns are very good for you because it stops white in the future to play f4 and kick our knight out. And we can go g4 next move also. Well, in my opinion, black is doing very well. For example, rook a d1, bishop e6. Well, if white goes knight d5, we can go c6. Well, you'll see the dynamics of this position. Black has very dynamically good position. Bishop c3, maybe even rook f d8. They're both equally good. Probably rook f d8. It doesn't make much difference. And f3, a6. And we may want to go b5. You see the strength of this knight on e5. Limits white's opportunities. It's very difficult to find some good constructive plan for white. Black is doing very, very well here. Well, this is another idea. So I'm kind of feeding you with interesting ideas that you may explore, you may play. And again, this is for people who never played King's Indian. They should start with it. Or people that played King's Indian and then maybe you are uncomfortable with the regular variations, with the main lines of classical in this case, or other variations of King's Indian. I'm suggesting supplementary lines that could be, in most of the cases, just as good. So there is other ways to play. So now I want to introduce you some new continuations in well-known variation of fianchetto variation of King's Indian. Knight f3, g6. Well, of course, it's any move order can lead to that. G3, d6. Bishop g2, castling. Knight c3, c6. Castling. And queen a5. On queen a5, I can tell you that there are only two moves that you should know how to play against. Well, there is move like queen d2. This is also a theoretical move, but this is not something that you have to be prepared against. Well, when you go queen h5, they go queen g5, so it's kind of super conservative way for white to play, and obviously cannot promise much of an advantage. Just to exchange queens, and what does white have? Really nothing. That equal position. But if white wants to fight for initiative, there are only two moves, h3 and e4. I have difficulties defining which one is more popular move, but that's not even important if you are prepared against both of those moves. On e4, I recommend bishop g4, h3, bishop takes f3, and now white has to take on f3 with the bishop. Now, why with the bishop? If white takes on f3 with a queen, we can go knight f6 to d7, attacking d4 pawn, and rook d1 move is practically forced. Protecting d4 pawn any other way, for example bishop e3, can create serious problems for white. Unexpectedly, queen b4 attacking two pawns, c4 and b2, and after queen e2, knight b6, white is in trouble. c4 pawn is hanging, b3 is not playable, so c5 has to be played, and after d takes c, and knight c4, white has multiple problems. b2 pawn is one, e3 bishop is the second one, c5 pawn will be after that. Black has big size advantage. So rook d1 is nearly forced. Black can go with c5 and knight c6 next, or they can go with e5 even. Well, black is, in my opinion, very comfortable. Also, not to mention that you can go simply knight a6, rook b8, and maybe go for b5. There is no advantage for white in this position. So the correct way to play bishop takes f3. And now knight fd7 is not that good, because I used to play knight fd7. I had even important tournament game played it. I survived, but after bishop e3 and on c5, e5, white has good size advantage. We don't need to analyze it because we're not going to play it. So after bishop takes f3, I recommend knight bd7, and now if white goes bishop e3, just go e5, and on d5 we simply take on d5 and go rook f to c8. You cannot analyze this position, you have to evaluate it, because there are no variations of fourth play. What is black's plan? Well, for example, white plays queen e2. We go a6. a6 is a useful move to prevent future possible knight b5. Maybe white goes rook ac1 or fc1. Then we can play queen d8. You see, queen has nothing to do now on a5, queen d8. With a possible continuation, I just give you an idea. White plays bishop g2. I like to play h5 move. And That's what I would recommend. If you want to play this variation and you want to know what are the ideas for black to play. For example, h5 move, and purpose of this move is to play king h7 and bishop h6. So if white goes, for instance, a3, we're going to go queen f8, try to play bishop h6, and now you see why h5. On something like this, you're going to go king h7, and next move you want to play bishop h6. So you will accomplish what you played for. And this is an interesting positional pattern. If white plays a4 here, black can achieve complete domination on the dark square with a very strong positional move h4. Now, what's for white to do here? If white takes on e5, there comes knight on e5, very powerful, followed by bishop h6. Same thing will happen if white takes on h4 or goes g4. Then black takes and goes knight e5. They have very strong dark square presence. Now they want to play knight f6 to d7, and white takes. They still have very good position with a terrible bishop on g2, and bishop g5 will... On bishop h6, white may win a piece by playing g5. But you see, if you want to play knight d7, and after bishop takes h4, you have very, very powerful play, probably winning position. Now you go knight c4, then you go the other knight on e5 and bishop to h6. Black has complete domination on whole board. It's a very bad position for white. So now let's go back to the situation where we played e5. Well, after e5, option d takes e is not very attractive for white, because I would recommend to take with the d pawn. Then you can go rook f d8. For instance, this is the famous patterns of dark square strategy. Rook f d8, and then go knight c5 or knight f8, followed by knight e6 and knight d4. Or you can do bishop f8, for example, bishop f8 and bishop c5, exchange dark square bishop. This is not a good way to play for white. But it's okay. We looked at e4 continuations, and I explained ideas for black after e4 briefly, very briefly. Well, of course, it's not enough from watching this DVD, just getting ready and go and play. No, you have to explore a little more for yourself. I'm giving you pilot ideas, and you have to work them out. You have to feel comfortable in it, and then you can play it. Now, the h3 variation. For a number of years, this was by far number one continuation, and probably the only sensible continuation. There is e5 move for black, but the move I like is bishop e6. And now there are a couple of moves for white. The main move, d5, and it's the main move because that's the most ambitious way to play for white for initiative. Or more conservative way, played against me by Karpov, which does not promise any advantage, because black can simply play queen a6, attacking the pawn on c4, b3, and now d5, and black has very comfortable position is a lot of pressure on c4 pawn. C takes d, queen takes d3, knight takes d3, knight takes d5, and bishop b2. Now we cannot take on d4 because we're simply going to lose a piece here. So we are not going to do that, of course. But that's what was happening in my game. And bishop takes c3, and now important move, rook fd8. If white chooses to play knight f4, then black has very strong move, knight f8, protecting bishop with a knight, increasing pressure on d4 pawn, preparing for c5. Black is doing okay, and my game with Karpov ended in a draw shortly after. So let's go back to ambitious continuation, d5. cd, and now of course cd is not good because simply going to lose a pawn. But knight d4, this is the main continuation. So main move here is bishop d7. I've played bishop d7, I've gotten good games, and still with accurate play, white has some advantage here. There is another continuation for black, hugely underrated, and this is d takes c. A simple exchange sacrifice. After d takes c, bishop takes b7, and black must play knight bd7, and now bishop takes a8. Now, what will happen if white tries knight c6 and then try to pick up the pawn on e7 with a check, because they are attacking queen, and pick up the rook? This is a bad idea, because we simply go queen h5, knight takes e7 check, king h8. This is very bad for white, because now when they take a rook and we take back, white's king is severely endangered, and this position, I may say, probably losing for white. h4. Well, you cannot just give h3 pawn, because then you can get mated. Queen takes h3 and knight g4, so h4 is practically forced. Now we attack the knight on e7. Queen takes d6 is out of question because loses a piece. So knight has to go back to c6. But if knight goes back to c6 after queen c5, attacking the knight, which has only one square to retreat, knight d4, now we can go bishop h3, attack the rook. And after rook e1, we go knight g4, attacking the knight with the bishop. Knight cannot move because there is a checkmate. So e3 has to be played. And now knight d to e5. Well, this is extremely dangerous position for white. Well, I would say probably lost. Just to give you an idea what may happen in this position. Now, on rook b1, move like queen takes d4 may seem impossible, but it wins the game. Queen takes d4, for example, will lead to immediate mate. And pawn takes d4 will also lead to immediate mate. Knight f3 check, king h1 is the same mate, and if queen f3, it's a slightly different checkmate. So this position is not defendable for white, and that's why whole variation with knight c6 move is not good. So the correct move for white is bishop takes, rook takes. Now, this position happened in a number of games. Most of the time, black misplayed this position, and they didn't get enough compensation. This is, in my opinion, one of the most underrated evaluation, most underrated variation in whole modern chess theory. In my opinion, here, black has not just sufficient compensation, I think black has an advantage. Well, h3 pawn is hanging. It's the best move. F takes e. And now the best move, there are other moves too. There is the e4 move, which is not very good for white because knight simply goes to c5 and d3, or maybe e5, d3. So we cannot analyze everything possible. I'm just bringing you roughly the estimate of the main position. Rook b1, just to show you, d5. Now, black's center may become very, very dangerous, so white will have to try to somehow to break it. So knight e5, ed, ed, just to show you this d3 square is very valuable. And if you think about it, what did we sacrifice? Did we make a huge sacrifice? No. We have a knight and a pawn for a rook, which is minimal material deficit. And here, e takes d, rook e1. And we play very interesting move here. On rook e1, we go knight e4. Now, this is an expected move. Knight takes e4 and knight takes d5. They both are not good. They fail to queen takes e1. And black has big advantage now. Knight f3 check, knight takes e1, and black has extra pawn and a weak on b2. Of course, black's pawns also, they have raggedy pawn structure, but they have an extra pawn, and they definitely have an advantage. The only question is whether it's sufficient to win the game or not. So, after knight e4, same thing will happen on knight takes d5. So, and black has big advantage. Or maybe even knight f3 check. They're both possible here. So, after knight e4, the best continuation for white is bishop f4. But then knight d3 gives black advantage. After knight d3, that's the best white can do. Queen takes e1, queen takes e1, knight takes e1, rook takes e1, d takes e, rook takes e4, and rook c8. White has better pawn structure, and they have to play, nevertheless, they have to play very accurately to make a draw. For example, bishop e5 move is a necessity. Taking on e7 will probably lose very quick because of the dangerous c-pawn, and rook c8, bishop e5 will give them salvage for a draw. So you see, white has better pawn structure, but b2 is very weak. We can go rook b8. Our king is more active, and our rook after rook b8 will be more active. That's more than sufficient for a draw. Maybe with the best play, white can equalize in this variation. But this is definitely the variation. In this position, I would prefer going to the exchange sacrifice rather than play bishop d7. Although there is nothing critically wrong with bishop d7, I still like d takes c. I didn't exhaust all the possibilities for white and black, but again, this is just feeding you the ideas. I'm feeding you the ideas. You should work on it yourself using some engine, some computer program, Fritz, Ripka, whatever you want to use. And they will assist you in a better way. But they cannot give you brand new ideas. You have to give them ideas. They will work with you. So this concludes our brief observation of some rather rare continuations for black and shattering in some cases some theoretical evaluation. And I think it's a good material for you to work and make King's Indian part of your opening repertoire. Now we will go to the gaming section. We start analyzing some games played on the variations that I just presented to you. First, I want to show you the game played on the internet against German IM with the variation that I covered in the beginning of our theoretical part of this DVD. So let's go with different move order with King's Indian and knight e2 variation. As you remember, I recommended to play this pawn sacrifice, and I strongly stood behind it. That's what happened in the game, and now bishop takes a6, and we exchanged, and rook takes f1. As I told you already, we have a good variety, very good variety of Benko gambit. And white cannot castle, knight on g3 is out of place, and black has a couple of extra tempos based on that. So castling, f4, rook e8. This may not have been the best plan. The good plan is also knight d7, followed by possible c4 and knight c5. Well, my idea was to open the e file, king f2, e6, and knight c6. Here, white played bishop e3, and I wanna follow closely to this game. Bishop e3 was a bad move. Very dangerous move was f5 and bishop g5. But after bishop e3, you will see how initiative can be developed. e4 pawn is barely stable, and white made 3 moves to castle. So now knight d4, and I'm preparing for d5. Bishop takes, queen takes, and queen d3. This is already totally hopeless for white because black's piece is dominating on the board, and after winning exchange, game is practically over. We don't have to look all the way to the end. This is bad display by white. So now let's look at a different game. Different game that is a lot more interesting and was played a lot better by white. So what happened here is same opening exactly, same sacrifice, knight g3. This is a better move. White doesn't want to take himself on a6. They wait for black to take. Castling, a4, knight d7. The only reason why this position is good for black, one and only reason, is because knight from g1 made two moves and went to the square where it has no future at all. That's what gave us the idea of sacrificing pawn for developing initiative. Now we go on c4, queen d2, pawn takes, and this position is already quite dangerous for white. Well, first of all, black wants to just get the pawn back for no compensation needed. There will be equal number of pawns, and black will have a lot more active position. So a4, but now after knight h7, white all of a sudden discovered that they are in a danger of suffering big material losses. Bishop on g5 is hanging because knight takes bishop, and if queen takes, then queen takes c3. And there is a threat of knight d3 check, followed by bishop takes c3. In this position, I don't think white can defend themselves. Bishop e3, knight f3 check. You see, it simply wins a queen. We fork on king and a queen, which forces white to take the knight, and then bishop takes c3, quickly results completely lost position for white. Quickly developed initiative and quick result. So this was not very well played game, but very typical for those positions. And yet another game played with the same variation, another strong player. And actually I was very much surprised to see so many different players playing against me knight g2 e2. Maybe this variation attracts a lot of people. Maybe it's on the verge of becoming popular for white again, the way it was a couple of decades ago. Well, anyway, b5, pawn takes a6. We get back to the same variation, but bishop d2 now. I don't really know the purpose of this move. The only thing I can think of that is white is waiting for black to take on b5, and after which they will play bishop takes b5, saving tempo and not developing bishop on e2, expecting black to take and not to make two moves with the bishop. Well, anyway, bishop d2 was played, but now h5. I want to play h4 and discomfort black's pieces. Bishop e2. Now we take on b5 because bishop has been developed. So now bishop has to make second move. h4, knight f1, knight e5. Black already has very active position. Well, let's just talk about this position in words. White knight from g1 went to e2, g3, and landed on f1. To make three moves with a knight and end up one square next to its original position, and this is not a great idea. Bishop standing on b5 already made two moves, so white has not done very well in development. So in this position, white went f4, which I think is a serious mistake, but they probably weren't happy with their position, and they maybe did not evaluate correctly bishop g4 move. Perhaps the best chance was to play fe and sacrifice the queen for 3 pieces. And white is not developed again, and it would have been more sensible continuation than just moving a queen. White overlooked here h3 move, which is a tactical shot, threatening hg with a fork on 2 pieces, and knight on e5 is immune yet. Rook g1, pawn takes g2, rook takes, and now after knight f3 check, white's king is in dangerous position, and white's position is completely falling apart. Knight d4, queen d3, bishop f3, and knight takes b5, knight d4 check. White is completely falling apart. We're just making few moves, and they may not have been the best moves, but we are talking about blitz game, so accuracy in blitz game is never guaranteed. White is, of course, white is lost, but we have to make few more moves, and they are down an exchange, and their king's position, white's king's position, is a lot more vulnerable than black's. And after rook a6, white simply resigned. Well, we're attacking queen, and if queen moves, we take the bishop. However, queen takes rook after queen g4 check, queen f3 check, queen f2 check, queen takes e1 check, then coming back to f2, queen f3 check. May not be a mate, but black takes all white's pieces, which is practically equivalent to a mate. That's why after a rook a6 move, bishop h6 and rook a6 move, good player here resigns, and that's exactly what my opponent did. Now, I want to show you one game on the classical, exactly what I was showing. Here is the classical played against Grandmaster also on ICC, on the internet. Well, that's the position I discussed, and rook e1 I discussed when I said we're going to be looking at the game in gaming session. That's what gaming session is. And under rook e1, bishop g4, my opponent played bishop e3. Actually, I played 2 games with it. This game and another game against different grandmaster, also with bishop e3 in this position. Now, in both cases, bishop takes f3 was played, e takes d was played, and knight b4. After knight b4, idea of move knight b4 is to bring knight to c6. Well, just to give you an idea, knight c6, and then knight d7. Then black's knight may go to c5 and rook e8. Black will have comfortable piece play, good dynamic position. e5 was played. This move, of course, was analyzed by me. This move seems like a good move, but it's not. D takes c and bishop c5. That's what white was hoping for. But after knight d3, of course it was all prepared by me when I analyzed this theoretical continuation. Knight takes e1, bishop takes g7, and queen takes d1. That's the key in any other way, any other thing we play here, white is okay, because a knight takes f3, queen f3, king g7, queen b7. But queen takes d1 simply gives black extra pawn and better position. What was played? Bishop takes d1, because now rook d1 will give black simply extra pawn in the end game, and bad pawn structure for white. Bishop takes d1, king g7, b3, knight d3, bishop f3, c6. I don't think we should continue this variation, because this is just way beyond theoretical interest. Black has extra pawn and better position. So total fiasco for white in the opening. Next game I want to show you was played also against Grandmaster, but this time it's very well known Turkish Grandmaster, and I want to show you, this is the same variation and same bishop e3 move, but different response by white. Knight d5, well, the purpose of knight d5 move, they want to go bishop c3 to keep bishop on that diagonal. Well, I played knight e5, b3, rook e8. I think black has very good piece play. Rook c1, a5, and knight fd7. That gives white an opportunity to secure two bishop advantage by playing bishop g2. But after knight c5, black is threatening knight d3 and rook c2, simply bringing rook on e2. That's a good play for white, bringing rook to e2 and maintaining space advantage. But after c6, knight f4 and queen d7, again black is doing fine. Rook d2 move allowed some very interesting tactics. Knight takes c4. This move was overlooked by my opponent. Nevertheless, it creates some interesting piece play. Bishop takes g7, knight takes d2, bishop b2, and here, of course, there is no other good way to stop this diagonal pressure, and we got to position that I went for. White has two minor pieces for rook and two pawns. Now, retroactively, would I go for that position, envisioning this concrete position? The answer is yes. I think I stood always well. Knight d3, rook takes, and d5, and now queen f7. Of course, winning this pawn is very bad for white, because black's queen side pawns, maybe b6 and c5, 4 against 2 advantage, will give black good winning chances. And basically, rook against bishop and knight is doing very well in endgame. This is known fact. Well, especially with white has no blockade and no coordination. So on top of that, white is trying to make some progress with their attack, with their weakness of black's king side. h4. Rook e8. This is just general centralizing move. And now queen b6, trying to pick up some of the black's pawns. g5. This is a quest for activity. Pawn takes and queen g6. All of a sudden, we are attacking the knight. Black cannot just sit and wait when white takes the pawn on a5. Then, if white takes pawn on a5, they may be better. So we go g5, queen g6, quickly activating queen and the rook. Queen d4 back, and queen takes g5. Again, queen takes g5 is a bad idea for all the same reasons I explained before. So black is doing okay here on king f1. Now queen f5. Idea was to go queen e4, and queen e4 would force exchange of queens because we're attacking queen and threatening mate on h1. Knight f4 would then queen e5. After queen e5 and queen e4, all of a sudden there is mate threat on h1. King g1 has to be played, and now we exchange queens without even giving away the f6 pawn. King f7, and white is totally busted here. That's another good example of interesting play. I do not claim that, oh, this is like a logical result of our analysis. No, not at all. I'm just saying that this variation and this way to play has as much of a right for existence as any other variation. And of course, then it comes some interesting tactical play, positional play, and you have to do well there too, because opening never guarantees you great result of the game. Some chess skills help most of the time. Now here is the game played with Averbach system. This is not like the greatest game played by both sides. I played with black against some strong player, but it's kind of a game that is maybe very typical. If you play this opening for black correctly, that's what you should expect. And it's played by quite strong player, so there were no visible mistakes. And you see the main reason why white lost. They got absolute disastrous position after the opening. So let's go d4, knight f6, c4, g6, knight c3, bishop g7, e4, d6, bishop e2, castle, bishop g5, h6, bishop e3, c5, d5, and e6. So far, we are exactly in a position that we analyzed in our theoretical part. After e6, let me explain you something. We said that there is two ways for white to play this position without including queen d2 and king h7. The other continuation with playing queen d2 and king h7. But I would explain it to you this way. It's hard for white unless they are very much aware about a theory, about concretely this DVD, not so much theory because this is not in the theoretical books. It's hard to not play queen d2, king h7, because by all means queen d2 looks like a lot more useful move than king h7. So queen d2, I took first on d5, and now king h7, and now we got to the very well-known position that was analyzed by us, the theoretical part, h3. Remember, Knight f3 will be met by bishop f5, knight e4, with a very good position for black. So h3, and I repeat again, on bishop f5 now g4, and black has to retreat bishop back to c8, since bishop e4 f3, and knight e4 is just as bad because knight takes in f3. So that's why we don't play here after h3 bishop f5. Well, b5, just according to our theoretical part of the analysis. b5, and that's why queen on d5 does not stand well if white takes with a knight in knight e4. And again, c takes b, of course we play knight d7, followed by bishop b7 and knight b6, and winning the d5 pawn. My opponent, after b5, took with a knight, and then we go knight e4, just according to our theoretical part of the analysis. So what happened is, until now, I haven't made any moves on my own. So knight e4, queen c2, and rook e8. Bishop d3, a6. That's exactly the move that was included in that theoretical part. Now, if bishop takes knight, black has absolutely great position. And if cb, queen a5, they are still a pawn down, but next move, queen takes b5, and white is almost busted, because what's the white to do? On bishop d2, you can just simply go queen takes b5, or maybe even queen e4, just winning the piece, because now after exchange, bishop is hanging, and f3 will be followed by f5, and black loses. But if king moves, then queen takes b5, check, then we take pawn on b2, and white has disastrous position. So knight has to be moved, and here, well, I would say only one mistake my opponent made. I have this position covered in theoretical part, and I said knight c3 has to be played. However, for some reason he thought after knight takes c3, and he didn't want double pawns, but that wasn't the intention. On knight c3 we have to go knight g3, and we're gonna look at it. So since white in a blitz game didn't like knight takes c3, so they went knight a3. But now knight g3 move that was played is a lot stronger if knight was on c3. After knight g3, in my opinion, position is completely lost for white. F takes g, rook takes e3, knight e2, and knight d7. After castling in knight e5, let's talk about this. Black has great dominating knight on e5, white's bishop is hanging. They have two strong bishops, and white has absolute zero coordination between its pieces. So I think white is totally lost. Rook a d1 was played, protecting the bishop. Queen e7, then just keeping an eye on f7 pawn, and also threatening knight takes d3, followed by rook takes e2. So after queen e7, rook f2. Well, I simply took on d3, rook takes d3, rook takes d3, queen takes d3. This may not have been the best continuation, but it sure gives black very, very good advantage. And bishop g7 back. Now what we have better pawn structure. We have two bishops in open position, so they are completely dominating two knights, and there is no counterplay for white. g4 was played. Now, after g4, I'm not sure. I could have played simply bishop d7, or maybe even rook b8, with a good size advantage. But what I played is also very interesting. f5, I want activity of bishop pair. And now those bishops become very vicious. But what happened is after f5, g takes f was played, and bishop takes f5. Well, what should white do in this position? If queen retreats and rook comes to e8, I don't think white can last long in this position. And my opponent, he made a practical decision to sacrifice an exchange and try for some initiative. King g8. And now, after king g8, he went knight f4. Knight f4 with the idea of playing knight e6. If white manages knight e6, they will have very good survival chances. Well, but after knight f4, my opponent apparently, he explained me after the game, he didn't think I could play rook f8. He thought rook f8 is a losing move. I did play rook f8. And now knight g6. You see, black queen has no checks, and rook hanging and queen is hanging, and taking queen is not good because black loses a rook. But he missed simple queen f7, but he missed this move in already lost position. And after queen f7, queen e4 was played. Well, if he goes queen d3, I think it simply queen f2 check, and on king h2, rook e8. There are no moves for white. Every piece white has is absolutely paralyzed. They don't have any moves. Any move white pieces make, they're gonna lose a piece or more. So my opponent played queen e4, which does not make much difference, of course. Rook e8, queen d3, and queen f6. Here I played queen f6 with the idea completely cutting off this g6 knight from any kind of escapes. Knight on g6 is trapped and has absolutely no squares. Knight e3 cannot be played because rook takes e3, and black is going to end up with extra piece. So after queen f6, h4 was played. Desperate attempt to play h5 to protect the knight, but h5, very strong move. Knight still has no move. Now he played g3, trying to play knight f4. g3 has to be played because here is deadly threat of king f7, which will trap and win the knight on g6. g3 was played. Well, after h5, g3 was played, but now bishop h6, controlling only escape square on f4 and preparing king g7. And after bishop h6, king g2 was played, king g7, knight has to go to f4, bishop takes, pawn takes, queen takes f4. Knight on c2 has no moves and it's been there most of the game, and black has multiple threats and huge material advantage. White simply resigned. Well, this game is very typical for someone who does not know all details of the novelty. Novelty is not in the books. So you playing the novelty, you should not expect your opponent to be prepared. But I would never recommend anything that is based strictly on your opponent not being prepared. Well, I can only recommend something that, keeping in consideration that your opponent is very well prepared, because even if he is prepared, we have to get good playable position. And that's exactly what this system against Averbach variation does. So this is all for our edition of News in King's Indian, and I hope you learned something, and I wish you the best with playing King's Indian for those who never played. And for those who played, well, there is a additional option for you. So good luck.